it's worth noting that people on spiritual paths, fakirs, for example, laying on bed of nails, etc., you could approach an illness as your ultimate spiritual teacher, and say, well, I don't have to lay on a bed of nails. I've got cancer. Hallelujah. I'm going to study this pain and learn all about myself and write a book about it as I'm dying and till the very end, or I can't write anymore. I'm going to make videos, dying of cancer. Here's my documentary. I don't think I've seen one, just a diary of the day and stuff, So there's lots of different purposes and values. And I don't think anyone can say for sure what is the right thing for you, which unfortunately means you're responsible for either choosing who you're going to listen to, and it's still you choosing that, or choosing your own thoughts on your own for your own reasons, which is, again, you choosing that. And that's going to be, and you will be the primary person experiencing the consequences of that choice in whatever way it is. The cessation of suffering, if you end things before things get too painful. I think it's a great conversation, and if we were a healthy culture, we would all talk about it with the real emphasis on serving you in your moment of dying. I want to encourage the book, The 5 Last Acts. It's a whole book about the legal aspects and laws around suicide and assisted dying. And if you're wanting to die without trying to cause as much suffering as possible to other people, then this book will help you prepare a responsible death. The best way to die, the right gas to use, the right products, how to design a peaceful dying apparatus. It's a great book. How to set it up so your spouse won't be considered for murder. Maybe you want to set it up that she's put away for murder. But if you're if she is not the reason or he's not the reason that you're killing yourself because you're so miserable, then maybe you want to set things up in a way that that they're a little bit protected from our bizarre. We're such a fucked up cult that we're terrified that people might just vanish in mass. It's like we've made it so miserable for people that they might just all get up and commit suicide. And so we can't have people escaping the torture chamber, so we've made it illegal. We haven't made it any nicer for people to live, but we've passed a law to make it illegal for people to escape the torture cell. And so so that means your spouse, if they've helped you out in some way, or your friend, I'm sure they would arrest the dog if they could, but we treat dogs better than human beings in this country. We don't have homeless dogs in America. We have homeless Americans in America. And I was talking with a homeless person because I'm doing a documentary on homelessness, and holding my little dog in his little dog pouch. And I live in a very rich area, so someone drives by in their fancy SUV, and they stop, and there's a guy there with a homeless sign, and she's completely ignoring a human being. This should tell you how important you are in this cult if you don't have money. So she's worried about the dog, and she's she's complaining that the dog might not be comfortable in his pouch. She's so worried about this dog that she's stopped in traffic to give me advice about my own dog, who, by the way, having tried a variety of things, hates it when I leave him alone and he loves his pouch. Meanwhile, no interest in the homeless person. I challenge her on that. She said, they can take care of themselves. I'm worried about the dog. And that's the attitude. dogs are more important than human beings. So I'm sure if you set up your dog to facilitate your suicide, although if you have a dog, just so you know, if you have a nice dog, your odds of wanting to kill yourself are about 20% less, because dogs are far more satisfying companions than Americans in the last hours of life as a statistical rule. So, you know, it's worth considering. It's certainly worth considering getting a dog if there's some part of you that wants to live. And I want to talk a little bit about my process because, well, 13, 14 was the first time I really looked into suicide. Every 2 to 10 years, I revisit it. Meaning every 2 to 10 years, the loneliness, the pain-pleasure mix, the sense of shame, the stress and pain in my body reaches a point where one part of me wants to die. And my approach is to meet it head on. Okay, fine. Let's make a list. So I get out my paper and I start writing. I want to die because my clients punish me for doing this thing that I really like. You know, it's like every time I have something really creative, they're scared of it and they don't want to do it. Every time I want to do something boring, they want to pay me a lot of money. Okay, that has been pretty true for a while. And I don't like the fact that every time that I get real, people get scared of me. I hate it. People are always asking me how I'm doing. When I tell them how I'm doing, they get scared. And then they punish me for the stupidity of their own question because they didn't want to know the answer. And I can't stand the hypocrisy. Okay. Pretty crappy. It's bizarre culture. Okay, I want to die because, women are always wanting to have sex with me, and then they're punishing me when I'm not the person they imagined I was, but they wouldn't bother to take the time to ask. And when I ask them, hey, before having sex with me, why don't you talk to me for 10 hours or so and we'll cover the groundwork so you'll actually know who you're being with. It's like, yeah, I'm not interested in actually taking 10 hours to get to know you. I just thought it was a nice, quick fuck. That's depressing. Fuck you. Go fuck someone else. I'd like an actual adult interested in a relationship, and could we talk about this? And so I'm tired of this. And then I've got, exhaustion from pretending, to carry this person's secret and trying to make this person feel good so that they don't feel guilty about abusing me. And I feel tired about that. And I feel sad about this. And I feel tired about that. And I'm lonely about this. And nobody ever wants to talk to me about this. It's so fucking boring. I have to talk to a fucking phone. That's the state of stupidity in my cult. Should talk about suicide on a phone. Not a phone call. A phone is more interested, you see? So this is, make the list. Anything else? Who else wants to die in there? Take a list. Anyone else? And I look at the list and I say, this is a damn good list. I don't blame you for wanting to die. You didn't create this fucked up cult. You didn't set it up so that every time you do something wonderful, somebody punishes you for this or doesn't understand it, and every time you do something shitting and boring, everyone thinks it's wonderful. You didn't set that up. You didn't set it up so that, you ask people, I've asked more than 100 people. I said, tell me what would make you feel completely and totally loved. They look at me with a blank stare like, I don't know, nobody's ever asked me that before. And I'm like, how dumb. Oh my goodness. We really don't think that's a useful question? Nobody in this entire cult has asked them that? Why the fuck not? Is it any wonder they're all feeling unloved and miserable? And, that ties into, I want to die because I see so many unhappy people. So many unhappy people who run away at opportunities to improve that. Oh, so frustrating. It's like, because half these people, they don't just sit down and make their list of what would make them feel totally loved, and then we brainstorm around it. They run away to someone else who won't ask such an awkward question. And then there's this, and then there's this, and there's this. It's like, oh my gosh, that's too much. It's too much. Okay, so we got the whole list. So I say, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with dying. Then, usually, at least so far, I hear another voice. It says, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do it? What if there's something else? And I say, fine. You got any ideas? You little voice in there? Do you have a single goddamn idea of how to make my life worth living? Let's hear it. If you want to live, give us a good reason. Now, this begins a constructive dialogue between the parts of me that want to die for very intelligent reasons and the parts of me that want to live for very intelligent reasons. And how I've emerged to date from that dialogue, like I did that with 14, where it's like I could die, I could go into the wilds, or I could get noise-canceling headphones, a lock on my door, do this, and so it's like, okay, well, of those three choices, I will pick the headphones and the locked door and all that. And then the next time it comes around, I will focus on my goals. When you're a young person, you got tons of goals. And so, I've achieved thousands of goals by having yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily goals, which exponentially speeds things up. 400% improvement. It doesn't, just start small and they build on each other. So goals, you achieve a bunch of goals, make money. The hardest point comes because these are ultimately psychological pains that are trapped in the body in a traumatic system. The hardest point, for me came when I had my dream house, no debt, dream job, had achieved thousands of goals, had done most of the things on my bucket list. And it's like, all I do is I have a lot of time to feel the pain that's in my body. And it hurts me a lot. And there's not a single person that wants to talk about it or carry the load. And after $150,000 in therapy and 30 practitioners, I'm not thinking the next time I hear another happy, chirpy voice that says, give us your money, we'll fix you up in no time. A very popular slogan. I mean, it's a good sales technique if you want to barrage gullible Americans and get their money. Is, we'll have you fixed up in no time. Just the other day, someone just had a miraculous healing. Only $150 an hour. Let's schedule a session. Once you've done that $150,000 worth with 30 different people all saying, we can help, we can help. It's it's not statistically rational to say, wow, you say you can help as well? You can spend my money for only, what? And I'll be fixed in no time? Oh, amazing. I've only heard that 30 times before. Show me where to sign up. You're going to be happy when you have lots of money? Well, I've got money, feeling depressed. So, not true, but another lie that nobody wants to talk about. Because when people see me traveling or doing this and that and the other or whatever, it's like, oh, I wish I could have your life. And nobody says, how do you actually feel? How do you feel about living the, quote, American dream and being lied to about it? And how much of what they tell you is true? And how has your trauma gotten worse or better in the last 30 years? Did therapy help? Nobody asks that. They just like to project that I'm living the lifestyle they want to live, that they tell themselves they'll be happy once they live it. And so they tell me that I'm very lucky and that I'm happy, and then they ignore me because they have to rush off and get into work to get to the point where they can travel and do this and that and the other. So it's not and the trouble with that last bit, when you've done your bucket list, when you've done your 150K in therapy, when you've paid off all your debts, when you've got a retirement fund where your house is great, like I take 6 months of the year off to travel, and you've had whatever amount of sex with amazing people, and that's probably not going to get any better. I mean, I met this woman that, this is the most amazing sexual relationship of my life. 3, 4, 5 times a day, day after day for months, exquisite sex. It's at some point, it's just sex. It's not. That's not. That's not the same as a soul mating relationship of being known. And what broke that apart was feeling that as I tried to be myself and speak what was true for me, that she wanted that to go away. And what she wanted was a fantasy. I was not her fantasy, and she didn't want me. She wanted the fantasy, so she kept asking me, as many people do, as my mother used to do, will you be my fantasy? Will you be my fantasy? Could you at least pretend to be my fantasy? Because I'm in love with my fantasy. I'm not in love with you. When you want to please someone and give them all that they want, and that's the most amazing thing in the world, and all they ask is just stop being yourself and be the person that I am fantasizing about. Could you just be that? Could you at least pretend to? So that I can have my fantasy? I'm not interested in you at all? Oh, it's so painful. And it's, of course, very lonely. It's lonely to be resented and hated for being who you are, and admired for being who you are not. It's incredibly lonely. It's very, very sad. And, I feel deeply for our famous celebrities who have the world projected onto them and who never get to be themselves in that world and be accepted and seen by their fans. For the most part, a few people can break through that and not entirely be hated for existing, which is, of course, why so many celebrities kill themselves with addiction and drugs. It's very, very painful when you try and be yourself and your agent says, no, that is going to ruin your career. You see, who you are will ruin your career. But if you would just pretend to be like this, you'll make millions, because nobody actually cares about you. Nobody actually wants you. We've done the studies, and people would like someone who's more like this. No, we know you have strong views of abortion, but your fans don't want to hear about them. So don't do that. And we know you have this and you care about this, but pretend not to. We know this really hurt your feelings, but we'd like you to smile and say that it was nothing. If you would just completely sell yourself out, be a complete prostitute, and not even exist, we will pay you hundreds of millions of dollars for the ultimate loneliness, where everyone clicks at their fantasy 500 times a day. Everyone pursues their fantasy in ignoring your boundaries and what you'd like. And your job is to play the role we've set up for you perfectly. And then pretend how much fun it is, because that's my fantasy. If you'll do that, you can be a celebrity. I can't imagine a more miserable role to find yourself in. So what I've done in these dialogues to date is made my list of negatives, made my list of positives, and I've made a deal. I've basically asked my negative part that wants to die, if my part that wants to live agrees to do this, 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 and this, would you agree to sign on for another 2 years or another year? You can always kill yourself then. But what if that part is right? What if traveling halfway around the world does make you feel different? What if trying psychedelics in this session gave you an insight and you didn't want to die anymore? What if doing this bizarre sports routine would change things? What if being a painter would re-inspire you? Who knows? Are you willing to give it a shot? We have the list of all the reasons to die. We have the list of all the reasons to live. And it's an honest question. Do we have a deal to extend life for another year? And so far, there's been a peace with that. Yeah, sure, we can always kill ourselves then, but we'll give it a shot. Now, this is, what's interesting to me about this terrain. The most interesting things that I've ever done in my life have been done in one of these deals. Why? Well, here's a few things to think about if you're on the edge of dying. And obviously it ties in with your own ethics. But I would say that the accurate equation is that the culture and family system that you've been born into has created a probability field of loneliness, pain, shame, and disease. You have some mix of those, or you don't want to die. It's very rare. Life wants to live. So if you want to die, you've got a mix of family and culturally induced shame, disease, pain, and loneliness. Now, if you want to die, it probably means you're blaming yourself for that. You don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to have a conflict. You don't want to make anyone else feel uncomfortable. You don't want to speak up and risk so-and-so losing their temper. You don't want to be disliked. You don't want to be unpopular. So you're going to kill yourself to make everyone else feel comfortable. If you didn't feel that way, you'd probably be out shooting people. Meaning if you said, those fuckers, it's their fault. I could care less about their feelings. Fuck them. Idiots. Kill them all. Get that one out of my way. That if you did that, you'd be very like your abuser, one. And you would be punishing and shooting other people. Killing them, basically, for causing all your problems. And you're not doing that. You're wanting to kill yourself. That may have gone both ways. Maybe you killed someone else and then you feel so badly you want to kill yourself. There's different ways of doing it. But the point to understand is that the cultural system generates a probability field. For example, in America, 60% of people have unprocessed trauma or more. 25% of people are dealing with sexual abuse. 1 in 7 has a substance addiction. 1 in 3 domestic relationships has domestic violence. This has nothing to do with you. Suicide is the second, leading cause of death. nothing to do with you. If you die tomorrow, those statistics will all be there. And if you're born, or some totally innocent child is born today, they're being born into those statistics. They have nothing to do with you. Those statistics are your betting average. You're showing up at a casino, playing dice, with all those odds against you of being in absolute misery. And you've still made it. You're here. The biggest trick in gambling or investing is to stay in the game, to survive. You're here. You've made it. Now, if you're wanting to kill yourself out of blame and protecting your victim, your abuser, that's not going to change this system, by the way. It may set the next person, up. And none of this is your fault. You don't have to do anything about any of this. Responsibility simply means you have the ability to respond. You can duck out of the game. I don't like this game. I'm going. You can duck out of the game. Or you can improve your odds of winning a crappy game. Or you can fight to change the rules of the game. That's the area that interests me the most. Is I don't want to winning in this game is easy if you work hard enough. I've read 500 books in the last few years. You learn a lot. You apply it. This is not a hard country to make money in. If you travel the world, if you're in America, for example, you can make money easily if you want to study it. You don't just play the violin easily, picking up a violin. No, you got to put in your 5,000 hours. But if you put in 5,000 hours, you can play the violin. If you put in your 5,000 hours, you can learn how to make money. You can start a business or whatever. And this is an easy environment to do it in. It's hard work, but it's easier than doing it in England. It's easier than doing it over in Thailand. It's easier than doing it in the Philippines. It's easier than doing it in Italy. It's easier than doing it in France. It's a good environment for entrepreneurship. So if that's what you want, there are immigrants who come over and are going to be millionaires in a couple of years who don't even speak English, who don't know the culture and who don't share the religion and the culture, and they're coming over because it's easier. So if money is your issue, you're home free. Just spend 3 hours a day studying money. That's what I do. I'd go to work, and listen to my Walkman when I was 17 years old and learn about sales and learn about customer service and learn about this and mentoring. And, it's like anything. It's hard work. But it is easier than it has ever been in history. It's easier than it has ever been in history to start a business in the United States in a whole variety of fields. So, that's not helpless. If I was worried about money, forget it. I would be very cheerful. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about physical exhaustion, adrenal fatigue from getting overexcited, which is what happens when you have early childhood PTSD, is every little thing upsets you. And then it takes hours to calm down. And then by that time, something else has upset you. And it's not in my control. And I can have $1 billion or I can have $5, and that goes on. I can be famous or unknown, and that goes on. I can be rich or poor. It doesn't matter. I can be the best violinist in the world, and that will still go on in my body. And it's painful. And it's lonely because no one else has a clue to ask about these things. And if you start telling them, their eyes glaze over. So it's lonely because no one knows what the biggest burden of my entire life is. And they don't want to know. And can you change the myopia and self-absorption of the United States? No. But you can travel, and so that's a hope, that I have right now. Asian cultures are far more empathic and emotionally oriented. It's heaven. All I have to do is be in Philippines or Thailand. I'm 300% happier, but I can't work there. There's lots of frustrating things around, stuff like that. Um, but in that dialogue, the reason it's been so liberating is the following. I've always been a hyper-conservative person, very safety, or, when you realize you're going to die, it doesn't make sense to avoid risk. So you can take huge bets that might pay off very badly if you're going to kill yourself anyway. And so this is a very healthy part of the dialogue with suicide, in my experience. So I remember feeling tight and poor and afraid of being on the street and this and that and the other. That was one, time. And I just said, well, I can leave my assets to my creditors. And if I'm going to die anyway, why don't I die in style? So I just, headed off for a month in Thailand. And by the time the month was over, I wanted to live because I, was trying to go out with a bang, and the bang was very interesting. And so it's like, oh, I've got some plans now. And so I furiously did those plans. Action, I think, is a very important thing. So I've done many things. I've started workshops. I've led groups on healthy relationships. There's a sculpture. We'll pivot over here and just see how this works. Anyway, that's a giant crystal sculpture. That's a water sculpture. The citrine at the top is lit. It's cast granite. That's a kind of thing that I enjoy creating. And no one has ever asked me to do anything like that. So how irritating that the stuff that I really want to do, nobody wants, to do. So I said, fine, I'll be my own customer. I will make some money, build some giant crystal bronze water sculptures, heavenly, And so those came out of that dialogue. I'm sick and tired of people constantly rewarding me for mediocrity and punishing me for anything interesting. So, fuck it. I'm going to, set aside $15,000 and build this stuff and really do something I'm proud of. Okay, done. You see, because I wasn't at that point when I wasn't wanting to die. Of course I've been wanting to build those sculptures. But I was thinking, well, but nobody's agreed to hire me to build them. They're expensive. What if they don't sell? All that becomes insignificant when the alternative is death. What if they don't sell? You'll be dead. No problem. And what if this doesn't happen? Fine, you'll be dead. So it's when death is the alternative. I've always avoided psychedelics. What if I had a bad trip? What if this? It's like, fuck it. You have a bad trip, you can shoot yourself, and you won't have a bad trip anymore. You'll be dead. What's the alternative? You're going to die anyway. What if it was a good trip? You see, what if it worked out? What if you went out and traveled around the world and were lonely? Well, then you can kill yourself in another country. But what if it was interesting? You see? Yeah. So there's a way that if you make a list of worthwhile, valuable things that you're not doing because you're risk averse or you're too scared or you don't want to inconvenience anyone, well, you have to think that through, because if you don't want to inconvenience anyone, by asking them if they'll loan you their boat or asking them to do something they don't want to do or telling them something they don't want to hear. If you don't want to inconvenience them, then you shouldn't kill yourself, because that's going to really inconvenience them, because the first thing they're going to say is, oh, I didn't loan the boat, it's my fault, and they'll be incredibly inconvenienced. And so if that's your plan for revenge, fine. But if you won't do the risky, useful things in your life for fear of inconveniencing someone, just imagine how inconvenient it is for people to have to grapple with why you killed yourself, why you did it without telling them, why you know, they have to now sell all your furniture and clear out your house and sort out what to do with your papers, all the things that you'd have to do if you read the book, The Five, Last Acts. They're going to have to do all that. So if you really care about them, you inconvenience the fuckers who are so self-absorbed they're willing to, let you go off in misery indefinitely and not deal with it. You don't take their self-absorption personally. This is a self-absorbed, traumatized culture. Traumatism, being traumatized induces self-absorption because it tells the reptilian brain, oh my gosh, I'm in danger. I have to rush around, do all this. It's all about me because you're in danger. That's what your body's telling you if you're in trauma. And when you don't deal with trauma growing up, your body's always sending you those messages. You're in trauma, you're in trauma. I'm an incredibly self-absorbed person because my body's always telling me I'm going to die. I'm looking around, how am I going to die today? And then, obviously, I'm not as empathic as I would be if I woke up feeling, everything's great. Then I'm curious about you. How can I help you? And if you travel around the world, by the way, you can see how sociopathic and empathic a culture is, which correlates to how traumatized and how healthy they are. You'll find that in Denmark, where they really care for their people, they're incredibly curious about the rest of the world and very well informed. And they want to know all about you. A Danish person comes to America, an American is incredibly ignorant, and they want to talk about themselves. America is a far more traumatized culture and country than Denmark because of the environment there. Every Danish citizen is paid $1,000 a month to go to college. They've got free health care for life. They've got a house if they need it. They've got unemployment if they need it. They've got job retraining if they need it. They've got paid maternity leave for both parents. They're an intelligent cult. So, of course, they're not in their traumatic reptilian brain. They're in their empathic areas of the brain. And as empathic people, they're very curious. So when I go to Denmark, I've got people all over saying, tell us about this and tell us about this. They're curious. The Danish come over here and it's all about us. So that's cultural. And you can go off to a culture where it's wonderful. Thailand, even more so, incredible interest and hospitality. It's like, wow, I'm not surrounded by traumatized people who are intent on using me for their next machinations. No. I'm surrounded by people in dignity and their feelings. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So, there are goals worth doing. And that was one of the things that I did, by the way. I said, well, I should at least travel the world before killing myself. I should at least make some art before killing myself. I should at least help this traumatized person, survive their trauma before killing myself. I should at least write a few books before killing myself. I should at least make these videos before killing myself. And if somewhere along the way, and I should do my bucket list. I mean, why not just do it? Because one of the big excuses of not doing your bucket list is you don't have enough money. It's like you're going to be dead. You don't need any money. You don't need retirement. You can blow your whole retirement fund to create an interesting life, and it's better than dying because your life is so boring, because you won't risk anything, if you follow what I mean. Your retirement fund is not necessary if you're dead. Now, of course, many Americans don't have a retirement fund, so it's a moot point. But even think about it in your debt, your credit cards, right? We love spending credit card money. If you die with $50,000 of credit card debt, no one's going to pay that off. And if you have to spend another $10,000 on credit card debt to get to an interesting enough life where you actually want to live, make money, and pay down your debt, that may be in your creditor's interest if you're worried, primarily for your creditors. So a lot of this, you just got to think it through and read Read stuff online if you're feeling too alone around suicide. Quora, YouTube, books on suicide, books on death and dying. Prepare for a good death. That's worth doing if you're going to die. Why not die well? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on death and dying. Why not have a great, and could you turn it into an event? Could you turn it into an art piece? So these are questions that relate to one to make, kind of terrain. And I would say that an experiment to see if life can be worth living and giving yourself a set year and really working at it is a reasonable thing to do if your body isn't, doomed to die, etc. Changing one's paradigm and sense of meaning. Like I'm in a lot of pain right now. I've got headache, I've got sore butt, my whole back aches. It's miserable. Anyway, there's pain, there's grief, there's depression. It's one of the reasons I'm moving. I'm moving my body, which ties me into exercise as one of the, as one of the parts of this process. You may need to get a little exercise. Sex can shift things around, and again, when you're planning on dying, little quibbles like, is prostitution a good idea? Is that really the most important topic? If a few orgasms could shift the chemical brain focus in your body with an adult who's making a free choice, is that really the number one thing to worry about? You can, but be aware that one of the tendencies of someone who's leaning towards dying is too much deferential behavior to other people, which means basically that you're living a lie and you're living in secrecy and you're living to make other people uncomfortable to such a degree that your life isn't worth living. Because you're not living at all anyway. You've killed your spirit. You've killed your truth. You've killed your soul. There's nothing of you here. There's just the pleaser of other people. So in that dynamic, if you pivot it towards look, none of those people are going to want to clean up my dead body. None of them are going to sell off my stuff. None of them are going to want to deal with any of this stuff. I'm doing them a favor by living, but to be fair, I'm going to have to be myself. I'm going to have to tell the truth. I'm going to have to, grow, do this and be about me, not fitting into this bizarre cult. And then you find that, okay, I'm happy to live in that situation. I'm being me. I'm happy to live in that situation. And so psychedelics with skilled help. Read 200 hours. Read 200 hours. Listen on YouTube and stuff. Really do your homework. It's a very important terrain. How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. Then there's, I think, James Fadiman. Then there's some of Stan Grof's work. Read the terrain. Terence McKenna. Study the terrain and go gently into it with safe people, or you can get way more fucked up than not. I got way more fucked up by a Human Awareness Institute facilitator, Peter Sandhill, who didn't know his shit. Charged me $175 an hour, did all kinds of weird crap, and then blamed it on me. And so it's very painful. Biggest pain in my life. That's another thing I would just draw forth. When all that went down, with the whole of what I thought was my kind of ideal institution community basically colluding to bury me, to hide their own secrets and their own abuses. Peter had abused me while on psychedelics. And I experienced 500% more pain going through my body than I've ever felt in my whole life. I mean, I could barely move. I had no idea loneliness could be that big, fear could be that big. It was, I mean, I was absolutely in the thick of it, which, and I'd been wanting to die periodically my whole life before that. And if you read something like the Gulag Archipelago, a good book to read, if you read something on Stoicism, something Tim Ferriss really likes, if you read, a variety of meaningful books about real suffering, you realize that, as absolutely mind-numbingly miserable as it is to be sexually abused and to be this and to beaten and humiliated, that there's always so much more. And that's something, to be aware of and to learn, that a human body and a human mind can tolerate an incredible amount of pain if they have a purpose. And one of my purposes out of that thing was to stop sexual abuse. Meaning a lot of my life was difficult before then because I was trying to find pleasure and I was in pain, and so I felt like I was failing. But I'm not trying to find pleasure. I'm trying to affect social change in arenas of psychological and sexual abuse and family systems. I'm not trying to feel pleasure, and I'm feeling like shit. I'm not feeling pleasure. But I'm not failing. I'm succeeding. I'm participating in something that's meaningful for me. And Viktor Frankl says you can endure any what if you have the right why. You can endure any what. You can, the Nazi concentration camps, they would take a Jewish person, they'd already murdered their family, they'd already starved them, stolen their property, and then at gunpoint in Auschwitz, they would tell them to pick up 100-pound bags. You know how heavy a 100-pound bag is, let alone when you're starving in winter, wandering in slippers? And they'd say, run, and carry that bag of salt from this side of the camp to the other. And then there's another gunman on the other side telling you to go back or you'll be shot. Do you know how barbaric that is? How cruel to take someone in their very last bit of despair and at gunpoint make them do something that has absolutely no meaning for no reason other than to cause psychological damage, to inflict the wound that says, you're not worth it. And a few of those people are alive today. And a few of those are at peace. And, Viktor Frankl had his sense of meaning. You know how incredible that is? Absolutely incredible. And if they said their lives were pointless because they weren't enjoying their life that day, they'd all have killed themselves. So they developed some meaning, some basis for surviving. And so service, a sense of meaning, experiment, psychedelics, travel, exercise, reading. Now, when I'm really depressed and tired, I can't read. So I have Audible. I have a great phone with 400 books on it. Just start a book on a topic that's interesting and listen. Experience the pleasure of laying back in bed, having a voice that I enjoy listening to teach me things that I didn't know before about death and dying, about psychedelics, about trauma, about childhood abuse, about fairy tales, about mythology. Teach me things about dreams, about health, about marriage. It's incredibly wonderful. A dog, as I say, has boosted my image or my kind of energy a good 15-20%. When you have chronic fatigue and your dog's licking you awake, it helps. It's that little prompt. It's much nicer than an alarm. So a dog helps. A really great companion, and in my experience, my wife is Filipino, and it's just so much easier to talk about feelings with her than almost, well, I would say at least 98, 99% of, my American partners. And it's so easy to go into feelings when they're not shameful, as they are in the United States. I would say that the majority of people that apologize to me apologize for having feelings. Usually women, because those are the only people that will allow themselves to have feelings and then apologize for them. But it's so lovely to be around someone, to be able to share all my feelings, to listen to all of her feelings, to play with a dog, to make art together, to build a marriage, and to work towards something else. So the latest thing for me personally, the nonprofit happinessdata.org. And, that's, it's the more pain I'm in, the more I'm aware that my pain is not even close to the most amount of pain many people on the planet are dealing with. And so the more meaningful it becomes to do something about it. And so that's, just a little bit of this landscape. And finally, I would say that, if you're in a suicidal place, you need help. And that help is not always going to come from a human being, and it's not always going to come from your family, rarely. And it's not always going to come from your culture. So I feel very, very lucky that I receive help from my dog. I receive help from my wife from another culture. I receive help from energy working with crystals. I receive help from dreams. And I receive help from authors, who write and explore this stuff. And because the pain is certainly very strong, I work with it with a certain amount of discipline. Like I ask myself to do 4 hours of useful stuff. I get myself over to Asia 6 months of the year, and that's huge. And death is not a bad thing. And dying well is an important right. The question is when and how, for what purpose, and to what degree of grace can you bring to your death so that it expresses some of who you are in the best possible way. And I appreciate you for letting me talk about this in my way. And I support you in doing what brings you healing, wholeness, and peace. Be that to change your life, to live a new life. Be that to end your life with grace in a way that works for you.